Hello everyone, and this is Dr. Sirisha, working as Associate Professor in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering College. Here we are back with some content on company-specific programming. Today we are going to see a most prominent palindromic-based substring and the functions used on strings kind of question, which is most frequently used by all the companies, hackathons, and any code challenging programs, right? So let's go fast and look at the question once. The question is quite simple question, which I have taken from Geeks for Geeks. Courtesies from them. So the question is a very simple question which asks for a longest substring in a given string, which is palindromic in nature, right? So have a look at the example which I have given. So first of all, understand what is a palindrome. A palindrome is nothing but a string which is read from left to right or from right to left. It will spell the same. Say, for example, consider the string madam, M-A-D-A-M, right? So if you read it from left to right or from right to left, it will spell the same. But the question is not so straightforward here. He is asking for a substring which is of longest length, right? So the string they have given is H-E-L-L-O-O-L-L-A-H. Have a look at this string. If you consider the whole string from left to right or right to left and go for a comparison, definitely they are not equal. But we cannot say that the whole string you have considered and it is not palindromic in nature. They are asking for a substring, guys. Please be careful. So let's start working on. Even though the first and last character are same, the second and last but one are not same, right? So we have to consider all the possible substrings form and contiguous, guys. Please do not mix it up. Do not reframe it, right? Whenever a question is asked on strings in this cosine, you are not supposed to reframe it, right? Take the string as it is, as they have given, and try to address the solution. Have a look at this one. As the first two and the last two are not matching, let's compare the between substring. Have a look at this one. It is nothing but L-L-O-O-L-L. And this will be the largest palindrome. If you read it from left to right or from right to left, it will be one and the same, right? So you can even say L-O-O-L is also a palindromic substring. Double O is also a palindromic substring, but he's asking for the largest, right? Which is of highest length. So LL-O-O-L-L, which is a string of length 6 becomes the solution of this problem, right? So I'm going to address the solution of this one by simple brute force method. Guys, what do you mean by brute force? Brute force method means addressing the problem with the straight solution. No ifs and buts, no logic, straight away taking the input and going for the method which gives you the solution, right? That kind of solution is known as brute force solution, guys. Okay, coming to brute force, you have to read the input as well as and you have to think of the output, have to get the output, right? So fine, have to read the input, how to get the output. Okay, fine, these two are fine. Then what will be the internal logic that you need to think of, right? So in any hackathons or placement point of view or any code challenges, they'll give you a privilege of choosing any programming language in your comfort zone. So you can opt for C, C++, Java, Python, C#, C#, any programming language in which you are comfortable. You feel that you have a good grip. Personally, I'm good at Python, so I have chosen that programming language. And now I'm going to address the solution of this one, right? Solution of this problem using Python. Let's go to Python. Yes, guys. We are in the Python environment. Here I'm going to implement or address the solution of the given problem. Our problem is to find the longest substring, which is palindromic in nature, right? So I'm going to use the Python environment of 3.10 version. So let me start. Let me take a new file, right? So let me start addressing the problem using brute force first of all, right? So then I'll tell you what are the drawbacks of that, why we are going for some other logic and all. Please concentrate, guys. Okay? Right. So first of all, let me write what is the basic agenda of our problem. That is to get the longest palindromic substring, right? So how to address this one? So first of all, I'm going to use brute force method, that is straight away addressing the solution of the given problem without going for any reduction or anything, right? So let me do the same. So using, first of all, let me write the driver code to read the input, what kind of input I'm going to take, right? Right. So the string will be, so input is the simple function which is required to read a string, right? So as Python is a programming language where you need not explicitly give the data type. So whatever the input you give, it will take it as a string. If you want to change that into integer, give a prefix int to that, right? To that reading line. Here as my requirement is a string, so I'm not going to give any data type specification, just calling the input function will suffice. So let me print. What I'm supposed to print? I'm supposed to print the length and the substring which is palindromic, the longest substring which is palindromic in nature, right? So let me do the same. So print, I will call the function over here, right? So longest So this is the function which I'm going to write, longest palindromic substring, a short form of the same. So as this is a function, I have to define the function. So we all know that before using any function, we have to define it first. So let me define. Now I have a clarity of what input I have taken and what are the parameters my function needs. So it will be comfortable for me to define the function. Longest par substring. So yes, this is case sensitive. I need to be very careful while declaring the variables or initializing them and all, right? So the input which it is taking is str. That is the string which I have read, right? So let me write the logic for the same. So n is equal to length of str. Right now I'm taking the length into the basic consideration, right? Once I take the length, right? Let me start. So max length. Let me declare the max length be 1. I'm considering this case. Why? Because what if the string which is given to us is having just one character? That is, if the string is of length 1, then it is palindrome in itself and its length will also be 1, right? So basic input which, suppose, say for example, the string which I'm going to read is having only one character, say A. Then the longest palindromic substring will be A itself, whose length is 1. So for that case, keeping that case in mind, I'm taking the max length as 1. I have initialized it as 1, right? So then I'm going to start. An initial dummy variable I'm taking start. So I have to run throughout the length of my string which is stored in n, right? So for j in range of, for every ith value, I have to calculate the same for j in range of n. So this is the nested loop I'm going to take, because I have to compare each n. So I'll take the first character, compare with the second, then with the third, fourth, fifth. If something goes wrong, I'll start with the second character. So this is a blunt way. Yeah, it is a blunt way of doing the things, but it is a productive one, right? So let me take the flag as 1, which is going to help me out whether I have reached my destination or not, right? So for k in range of, from starting from 0 to j minus I want integer division to get a integer value, right? So within this, I'm going to check whether my string, so let me open a bracket, whether my string at position I plus k, as the k will start with 0 value, right? So I plus k, is it not equal to str of j minus k, right? So is the condition satisfied? That means it is not a palindrome. If they are not equal, then it says that it is not palindromic nature. Then I'll set my flag to 0 and I bounce back. Okay. Now I'm going to check that if the flag is not equal to 0, that means I reach a place where I have the values of I and j such that the characters are same. The characters which I'm extending from a point to left and right, they are same. And within the kth loop, flag, the condition within the kth loop, the condition was never same, right? Never executed, and flag was never set to 0. Then I have reached a place where I have a string which is a substring which is palindromic in nature, right? Now I have to check. Okay, I reached my milestone, which says that there is a substring in my hands which is palindromic in nature. Now the second milestone will be, I have to check whether it is the longest substring or not, right? Fine. For that I have to compare with I minus j minus I plus 1. Is it greater than the maximum length or not? Right? So I have to modify the length value, that is the final result. They are asking for the longest palindromic substring along with its length, right? So I have to modify that also. So then if in that case the start will be modified to I, which I have initialized to 0, then my max length will be j minus I plus 1, as it is greater than the maximum length, which I have initialized to 1. Keeping, as I said, keeping a string of length 1 into consideration. Okay, fine. So once I run throughout this logic, which is a nested loop in 3 steps. It is a nested loop in 3 steps. I, which is going to run n times, j is inside it, which is going to run n times, and k inside j, which is even going to run for n number of times. Once I'm out of it, I'm going to just print the string, which is the output, right? Which is going to start with an index value start, and it will end with start plus my maximum length I'm talking about, right? So that will be the delimiters, right? So the string which starts with the index value start and ends with an added of its length, the maximum length, right? So that will be the string which I need to print. And what is the point that I have to return? The maximum length, which my print statement is going to print, right? So this is how you can address the solution of the given problem. And let me save this first one, guys. So what is the agenda? So longest try to access it, it will be very easy for me to identify it, right? So, okay guys, let me save this once again. Look at the driver code. I've just read the input. I've called the function, passing the input as a parameter. So in this one, you can see that first of all, I have calculated the length of the string, and I have considered the case where this string length will be max 1, and I have started my index with 0, right? And I have written a nested loop of 3, right? So job done. Let me check whether this is going to get executed or not. So they're asking for a string. Yes, I got the answer. The answer is the substring LL is the largest one. Okay, guys. Yes, this is working. Okay, let me go for a case where it will not even work. Okay, so let me give some random value. It is not going to give you the only first character it is considered. Okay, right. Now, my point is a very simple point which says, is it worthy enough to go with this scope? Right? So, how do we evaluate? How do we evaluate the working of any algorithm? Even though it is working, good to know that, but still, there is a problem, right? So, there is a problem. You can see that I'm using a nested loop in 3 steps. Right? In 3 steps. Then what will be the time complexity of this program? Okay. Let me go to the slides and explain you the same. Yes. So what is the complexity of the program which we have done using brute force method? So I have used 3 loops for I, so on, for J, so on, and within that for K, so on. Then what will be the complexity of this one? So ith loop is going to run n number of times, jth loop is going to run n number of times, and kth loop is going to run for n number of times. So the time complexity of this code will be big O of nq. Can you see that? 3 nested loops, 3 steps nested loop. And the auxiliary space you are going to use is just a simple mere temporary variables. So order of 1, that is fine. So you are satisfied with this space, but the time complexity is very high. And you know that you are recursively using the same logic, right? So then why you are going for brute force, which raises your complexity? Right? The cases where you can store the partial results and use them in your further steps, then that means breaking the problem into modules. Then dynamic programming is the best solution for that. So let us give a new solution to this problem, which reduces the time complexity by taking the leverage of dynamic programming. So here goes my logic. What I'm trying to do is, so I'm going to take a Boolean 2D table, 2-dimensional, that is a matrix, right? So, and I'm going to insert values into the table, that is ith row and jth column value. And I have already said that it is a Boolean table. That means every cell in this table is going to take either 0 or 1. That means if the entry, if the combination of an I and J is palindromic, then I'm going to set it true, or else I'll set it as false, right? So how I'm going to deal with it? So the value in the table, that is the cell, the ith row and jth column cell, will be true if the substring between that means if you have considered a string str, then between I and j, if this is palindromic in nature, then the cell tab of I, j will be set as true or else false. Okay, so how to achieve the same? Have to set this one. Orally I have said simply that between the ith index value to jth index value, if they are true, then fine. Have to do that. So there are 2 steps for that. Within the table, consider the I plus 1 and j minus 1 cell. If it is true, that is, if it is pre-processed one, right? So if it is true and the characters present in the string, ith index value and jth index value, if they are same, then I can say that in my table, ijth value is true, right? Or else it is false. Right? So first of all, initially when I initialize this table, start initializing, that means I have to hold the values of these in my hands. So for that, I have to manually insert or start filling the 2-dimensional table for strings length 1 and 2. Manually I have to do that. Then I'll have the prerequisite values which I can reuse. I'll start filling the table unless I get the longest possible one. Okay, so let us do the same and let's see whether our programming using the concept of dynamic programming, can I reduce the complexity or not? Let's go to Python environment. Yes, guys, we are back with Python environment and this is the program with the brute force. Okay, so let me wipe it out and let me open another file. Okay, to run with this one. And let's go for the naming ceremony of the code. So longest palindromic substring, and the method I'm going to adopt is DP, dynamic programming. Okay, well then have to start. Obviously, as usual, I say identify what input you have to read and how you want to present the output. These are the 2 major things, right? So to go for that. So ST is the input which I'm going to read, and I'm going to call the function longest for substring. To that, I'm going to pass the string which I have read. So before using, this is my driver code, and before using any function, I have to define it. Let me define that. Define longest pal substring, right? And the parameter which I'm going to pass to this is the string, right? So I have just wanted to change the terminology and I have changed it to ST. Okay, so have to do this one. As I said, declare a 2-dimensional table, right? Let me store the length of this string in n. That is the first point, because most frequently I'll be needing the length of the string, right? So let me initialize a table, which I said I need a 2-dimensional table. Then that should be Boolean in nature, right? So that I'm going to initialize with zeros. Initially, I have not compared with anything. So once I start comparing, I'll be overwriting the zeros with ones, right? Great. So for x in range of n, for y in, guys, this is how we go for declaring a 2-dimensional array which is known as a matrix. Okay, so 2-dimensional data which is filled with all zeros, and the dimensions are n by n, where n is the length of the string which we have read. Okay, so ML, the max length, I'm using this case, as I said previously, to consider all the substring of length 1. They're all palindromic in nature. There is no doubt in that, right? So let me initialize a variable I is equal to 0, which I might need because I don't know how far I'm going to stretch. So I'm using while loop. Okay. Till the length, I'm going to search, right? So table of I will be true, right? As I said, guys, very simple. Every character is a substring of the main string. So every single character is palindromic in nature. A single character, say A. If you read it from left to right or right to left, it is palindromic in nature. So I'm talking about the primary diagonal, that is 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, so on, n-1 to n-1. So all the diagonal entries will be true, and they must be true, because I'm considering a character which is of length 1. For that purpose, I have taken this one, I plus equal to 1. Okay, so in the matrix table, which was initialized with all zeros, now I'm converting all the diagonals, primary diagonal elements as ones, right? Now I have to deal with the, as I said, primarily I have to fill the table. That prerequisite is I have to fill the table with the strings or substrings of length 1 and 2 manually. For 1 I have done, for 2 I have to do, right? For substring of length 2, right? Okay, let me help you out. I'll write a comment for here also, for substring of length 1, right? So now let us deal with the case where I have to deal with substrings of length 2, right? So I'm going to take a start variable and I'm going to reinitialize my I variable to 0. And again, I have to go for the whole length while I is less than all substrings of length 2. So if I'm taking the n-1 means 2 means I'm be taking the last element also, right? If I travel till last, the last character, right? Last character, I'll not find the next element, which will give me an error of out of index. To overcome that, I have taken a step back, right? Great. So if the ith index value is equal to I plus 1, that means 2 consecutive elements I'm trying to compare. If this is true, then I'm going to change the index in I plus 1 as true. As I and the next character, that is I plus 1th character, are same. If they are same, then the entry in the table must be turned into true, right? Then I'll change my start as I, because I have to take incrementation of say your numerically. Let me take an example. If a character in second index and third index are same, right? So again, I need not go for the third one. Directly I can go for the fourth one, right? Comparisons, guys. So step by step, I'm going to do that, right? So, and max length, I'm going to initialize to 2, max length. So 2 characters are same. The max length right now, temporary, as a sub result is, it's 2, right? So, yes, great. Then once it is done, I have to increment my ith value to take a next hop, or else while we'll go into an infinite loop, right? So I have taken a hop. I'll do that. Okay. So now I have covered the cases for all the substrings of length 1 and 2. Now the actual game starts for substrings of length more than 2, right? So I have to consider the remaining cases now where the length of the substring is more than 2. right? So 1 and 2 I have manually done. So I have some data in my hands. Using that, I'm going to build the next steps. I'm going to use the values of the already filled in table values, and I'm going to use them to fill the remaining cells, right? To the extent I'm going to do. So this is nothing but dynamic programming, using the data which you have already calculated to go for the next step, right? Store and reuse are the two fundas of dynamic programming, which reduces the time complexity, right? So yes, where I am, yes. So let's start for the cases where the substring length is more than 2. So let me start with 3, right? So while k is less than or equal to n. So for all, I'm going to generalize the code for all the substrings with length 3 and more than 3, right? So I is equal to 0. I have to reinitialize it. While I is less than n minus k plus 1. Okay, n minus k plus 1. J is equal to I plus k. I'm moving, I'm checking the string from I plus 1 to j minus I plus 1 to j minus 1 are palindromic in nature or not. This is the logic for the same. If table of I plus 1, j minus 1, right? I minus 1 is true. I've left it like that, means it is true. If it is true, and guys, I think index values must be represented with square, right? Yes. Now, within the string, if the ith value is equal to the jth value, if both are same, if they are same, then the table turns with the table I of j will be initialized to true, right? So once it is true, then if I have to modify the length also, max length. So if k is greater than max length, then start is equal to I, right? So you have taken a hop, a large hop with the I, right? So, and you have to make the max length also as k. It is the max length, right? So fine. So I have modified. Have a look at this one, guys. For the cases in the table, I plus 1 and j minus 1 entry is true in the table, and the characters represented by I and j are same, then override the entry of ij in the table with true and modify the max length if the k value is greater than the maximum length. That means you have achieved a substring which is of higher length, right? Fine. Let's go with it. Then once you are done with it, let me increment my I, right? Which I have repeatedly do this one within the loop, right? So, and within the loop, I have to increment the kth value also, because the outer while loop is based upon, is working on k value. If I'm not going to modify it, it will go into an infinite loop, because, okay, fine. So I have to work it with all the values, right? So once I'm done with this, I just have to print the string, which is the longest string and which is palindromic in nature. Okay. So within the string, with the start as its a index value, the starting index value, and the stopping index value will be start plus the maximum length. What else can we expect, right? This will be the maximum string, which is having the longest length, possible longest length, right? And what I have to return? I have to return the max length. I have to return the maximum length. Let's have a look at this problem, guys. So longest palindrome substring, right? So in dynamic programming, as I said, I'm going to store the partial results. So I have taken a table right? Which is of size n by n, and marked its entries. All the entries are zeros. If the I and jth characters are same, then I'm going to overwrite it with true. Okay, so I have to deal with the cases where substring length is 1 and 2 manually, and the remaining I have generalized. Okay, and whatever the return value is, the driver code is going to catch that value, and it is going to help me out in printing the length, max length. Okay, right. Let me save it and let me, yes. With what name shall we save, guys? Longest palin substring 2. Okay, this is using DP, right? So let me give same string. Yes. Got it? So we got the maximum or the longest possible palindromic substring and the length of it. Right? So both the things. Yeah, we are doing fine. And now have a look at this code and let's go back to the PPT ones. Guys, yes, very good. In the whole program, you can see that I have just gone with the 2 while loops, while which runs for n number of times, and the inner while runs for n number of times. So looking at this one, the time complexity is big O of n square. Very good. The complexity, the other side of our coin of complexity is the space, the auxiliary space which I am going to use, which is a bit higher, in this case n square. Why you got n square? Very simple, because in the auxiliary space you have used a 2-dimension table, my dears, which is a temporary one, right? Which have not come from the input, or which you are not going to throw it as an output. For internal analysis, you have taken a table which is of size n by n. So you got this high auxiliary space. Coming to this logic, time complexity is good, but you got bounced at the auxiliary space, right? So have to do this one. Right? Reducing the time, in the previous case, auxiliary space was fine, but brute force, as when I'm talking about brute force, auxiliary space was fine, but time complexity was very high. Execution time I'm talking about. So here the coin has reversed, even if you have used dynamic programming. That itself tells that, guys, please reduce the auxiliary space which you are taking, the temporary space you are taking. Yes, we can do that if you think wisely on the logic. Dynamic programming doesn't say that your logic is, says that it is logic is right, but it doesn't say that it is optimal. You can still optimize it if you change the logic and use dynamic programming for the same. To address the same, let's go for the third solution of the same problem. Let's go back. This was our previous solution. Let me open a new file for the same. Yes. Okay. So here our main agenda will be to keep the dynamic programming concept with us, and thereby reducing the space. Please do not go for a 2-dimensional data table, right? As an auxiliary space. Don't do that. So how we can do? Very simple is divide the solution into 2 halves, saying considering the even length palindrome and odd length palindrome. Get the largest in these 2 cases and compare the final results of these 2. Job done. Let's do it. Longest palindromic substring. Okay. And the funda I'm going to use over here is dynamic programming with the less auxiliary space. Right? So agenda is that. So coming to my driver code, I am not going to change anything in my driver code. There is nothing to change. First of all, guys, let me change the name, or else you'll get confused with the previous solutions. I'm just reading a string, and to the function I'm going to pass longest path substring. I'm going to pass the string as an input, right? So I have to define the longest path substring. Let's do that. Longest path substring. Okay, and the parameter for that is the string which I have read. So initially, let me take the case where the string length, the substring length is 1 and start is equal to 0. A dummy variable I'm going to take, and I'll take it as 0. And let me calculate the length of my string using len function. Okay, now the thing is I have to consider the cases of even length substrings and odd length substrings. So for that, if I'm considering odd length for any indexed value I plus 1 and I minus 1, that means it's considering its successor and prefix and successor, then concatenate and check whether it is palindromic in nature or not. For even, take some I and I plus 1, the next value to it. Are they palindromic in nature or not? Do that. You'll get it. Let's do that. I'll show you how. Low is equal to 0, and I'm taking two parameters, low and high, and I'm initializing them to zeros. They're going to act like my pivotal points, which is going to run left and right, which I'm going to change, right? So first of all, I have to run throughout the length of the string. So a loop for I in range of from 1 to length, right? From 1 to the first indexed value to the length, that is the length of the string which I have considered. So I'm going to address the solution for even length first of all. Even length palindrome. Even length palindrome. Okay, fine. So I'm going to set my low as I minus 1, right? I hope you understand why I have started my range with 1, because I'm going to set my low, the value, the variable which is going to run, as I said, total point, which is going to run with a step previous to that. So if I start my range function, the for loop, with 0, and it goes, if it tries to access an element which is prior to that, it will give me out of index error, right? You're crossing the left side boundary. So I have taken the range from 1. Good. Next, the high will be I itself. I'm comparing two characters, my dears, right, of even length, and I'm going to extend it unless I get the longest substring. Right. So while low is greater than or equal to 0, and right, you should not cross the boundaries. So lower must be greater than or equal to 0, and high value is less than. So I have set the boundaries. Low must not cross the left boundary, whereas a high should not cross the right boundary, right? And string of low is equal to string of high, right? So I have set the boundaries, and I'm comparing the characters pointed by low and as well as high, right? So if this condition gets true, then my low is going to take one step back and high is going to take one step more, right? So back and front I'm going to run. So low I'm going to decrement and high I'm going to increment. So low minus equal to 1 and high less equal to 1. I'm moving them, right? Once this condition fails, out of these three conditions, any one condition may bring this while loop down, right? So once you get finished with this conditions, so set the low is equal to and high, manually do that to get the positions, right? You have to increment this because you have changed this, but the condition failed. So I'm going to reverse it, right? So what next? If string of low is equal to string of high and high minus low plus 1, that means within the limit, I have to get the max length also, right? So L max length, if it is greater than max length, if the condition satisfies, then start is equal to low and max length will be high minus low plus 1 parents. I've set the start point as well as I have modified the maximum length also, right? This is the case for even length. So and now I have to address for the odd lengths, right? So what I'm going to write, odd length palindrome. So odd length palindrome I have to check now. So fine. So I'm going to initialize my low as I minus 1 as usual, but high will be a step next, right? So previously high was pointing to the ith element. Now high will be pointing to I plus 1 element, right? So now you are comparing between I minus 1, I and I plus 1. 3 elements. The string length will be starting with 3, which is odd, right? So let's start. So while low is greater than or equal to 0 and high is less than length, the same as usual condition which restricts you that you are not supposed to cross the boundaries, right? Compare the elements pointed by or the characters pointed by low and high respectively. String of low is equal to string of high. If this condition prevails, then decrement the low and increment the high. Very simple, right? Once you are done with it, once you encounter a case where one of these three conditions fail, then you will be out of the while loop. Then you have to, as you have incremented the values, you have to take a step back, right? Let me do that. Yes. So low less equal to 1, high minus equal to, okay. So I have reset the low and high positions, right? So if string of low is equal to string of high and this piece of the condition is to update the maximum length and high minus low plus 1 is greater than the maximum length, then start will be pointing to low and max length will be pointing to high minus low plus 1, right? And there ends my logic of calculating the maximum length even palindrome and maximum length odd palindrome, right? So now by the end, once I calculated even and then odd, I have the updated substring which is of maximum palindromic nature, right? So once I have done that, I can simply print the string starting with start and ending with start plus maximum length, right? Starting from the index value start and ending with the index value, which acts as like a stopper. Start plus ml, right? The maximum length, right? And I'll return the maximum length because we have to give the result in two parameters. The first one is the maximum substring as well as the length of it also. So the maximum string I'm printing in the function itself, whereas driver code is going to take care of printing the length. Okay, let's have a look at this code once. Here you can see that I have used a nested loop, just a nested loop. For within that a while. For is going to run for the length order of n, and while is also going to run for a length n, which is order of n. So as it is nested, the complexity of my code, time complexity of my code will be order of n square, right? Let me run this one. I have to name it. So longest palin substring 3. This is the third one I have done, right? So let me give the input. So I got the output, right? So maximum substring of palindromic nature is LLOHLL and its length is 6. Have a look at this one, guys. Have a look. The maximum time complexity of this code is big O of n square, right? So, and what about the auxiliary? Have you used any two-dimensional data? No. So you have used the temporary variables ml, order of 1, start, order of 1, length, order of 1, low, high, all are of order of 1s. You do not have any, you have not taken any list of size and say you have not taken any matrix or a table, a two-dimensional data I'm talking about, which is temporary or which is used. No, you have not taken. And here the one-dimensional data which you're talking about is the input itself, right? So coming to the auxiliary space case, the complexity is order of 1, right? Have a look at this code, guys. The complexity of the time complexity of this piece of code is big O of n square, whereas the auxiliary space is big O of 1. So guys, it is evident that brute force will give you brute force method will give you a solution with very high time complexity. To overcome that, you can adopt mini techniques depending upon the question, what it needs. All the solutions cannot be divided into modules, and the previous modules will be used by the nth module. It is not possible, but in most of the cases, it is possible, right? So in this case, it is possible. So I have adopted dynamic programming. Even in dynamic programming also, you have to take care that you have to take care of the choice of the logic which you are taking, right? Even though the second solution which I have addressed you is having a lower time complexity, that means a single step nested loop I have taken, but I'm using a temporary table, two-dimensional table, which raises the complexity of auxiliary space, which can further be reduced by considering even length palindromes and odd length palindromes, right? So same dynamic programming with a different logic will reduce the auxiliary space which is needed for the execution. So I hope you understood, guys. So attaining the optimal solution for a given problem is the crux of the coding process, which you can attain just by practice, which I can say, yes, just by practice you can attain. Okay, so yes, only by practice you can, guys, you can do. You can think that you got the solution, but most of the cases in code chef challenges, I have seen it many times, the logic will be right, but it will say that time exceeded, right? So that word itself, you have looking at that word itself, you must understand that yes, there is some other optimal solution for that. right? So guys, do programming, get used to that, make friendship with programming rather than treating it like a ghost or a challenge for you. Don't take it and consider it as a game and try to solve it with less time and auxiliary space complexity. Okay. Thank you for this session. And the next session, I'm going to address you with one more interesting question with n number of solutions for that. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.